A number of state lawmakers are considering bills right now that would protect female athletes who in many states are being forced to compete against males who identify as female. At the federal level, a group of GOP House members have introduced a bill that would take away Title IX funds from schools that allow these biological males to compete against females. Our Heather Sells sat down with the bill's sponsor, Congressman Greg Steube from Florida, and has more.
Congressman Steube, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What was your motivation in putting out this bill, and what kind of support does it have right now?
Yeah, so the Democrats passed in the Judiciary Committee what's called the Equality Act, which completely redefines what a woman is. Under the definition of the bill that passed the committee, it could be any person that identifies as a woman that day, depending on their feeling or identity. There's absolutely no definition to women. And so what we did in that committee for the Equality Act bill is I filed an amendment on this very issue that would make it very clear that men could not compete with women in women's sports under Title IX. And obviously it didn't pass in committee. Not a single Democrat voted for it. I then did it on the floor of the House in what we call a motion to recommit, which is the minority's only ability to force a vote on an issue that's a subject matter of the bill. Very few Democrats on the floor voted for it, and it didn't. My amendment didn't pass. The motion to recommit did not pass on the floor. So after all that, I thought it would be a good idea to file a standalone bill on the issue to make it clear, one, that in women's sports, women are going to be competing with biological women, and that if schools allowed biological males to compete with biological women in women's sports, they would lose their Title IX funding.
Wow. So what is the resistance that you are hearing from Democrats? What is their opposition to this bill?
Well, you know what's interesting is you don't hear a lot of resistance publicly, and what they'll do is they just won't bring it up for a vote. Obviously, in the Republican side, it's very well supported, but there is a lot of dissension amongst Democrats on this issue. Democratic women. I was actually just at a lunch today, and there was a gentleman at the lunch that told me about his wife and his kids who competed in high school athletics and how this is just a non-starter for them. They absolutely think that women should be competing with biological women. And his daughter, he told me that she competed in high school and was trying to get a college scholarship, and she was absolutely appalled that this is even something that we as legislators at the federal level would even have to file a bill on to address. So you don't hear Democrats talking about it because I think it puts them in a very tough position. I think even Democratic members of their party that are women that have young girls competing in high school or college athletics certainly don't want their daughter competing with a biological male and losing scholarships. So what they'll do is they just won't bring it up for a vote in committee and force their members to have to make a decision on it.
Well, it's so fascinating because, as you're saying, everybody has a daughter or a niece or a goddaughter who could potentially be affected by something like this. Because of that, because so many people are affected by this issue, where do you see it all headed?
Well, you know, you're splitting the Democratic Party because even people like Maria Navratilova, who's been very vocal on this issue of women's and collegiate women's sports and competitive women's sports, has come out against the Equality Act in support of what I'm trying to do. And so I think you're going to see a lot of split. There was an op-ed in a national paper not too long ago saying that my bill has put Democrats in a tough position because it's making you choose between actual women and women's rights and women's ability to compete with women in a fair environment and transgender or trans men competing. So I think it's putting them in an interesting position. So I'm trying to get out to talk about it as much as possible so that the public is aware that this is a real issue. If that Equality Act would become law, which it won't because it won't be passed in the Senate and the president wouldn't sign it, but if it did, you would have a right for men who identify as a woman to compete against women in college and athletics events, even throughout our communities.
All right. Well, I know this is just beginning to catch people's attention across the country. Congressman Steube, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.